I'd always thought my brother hated me. On the day I was bullied to death, I didn't call him for help. But the brother who was supposed to despise me to the core hunted down every one of those who bullied me after my death. There were 5 of them in total. My brother, covered in blood, dragged their heads to my grave, and then calmly turned himself into the police. When I opened my eyes again, I was back in high school. My brother, who always looked down on me with disdain, was still glaring at me with disgust. "Don't come near me. Go play somewhere else." I directly confronted him, meeting his surprised gaze. "Brother, who saying you love me kill you?" Then naturally took the phone away, smiling as he said, "You never used to watch these kind of emotional videos." She's really confessing to the school heartthrob. I seemed to be surrounded by a crowd. Then I looked down and saw my hands holding out a letter. Suddenly, I realized I had been reborn. I was being forced by my bullies to confess to the heartthrob, with them lurking behind me, enjoying my humiliation. Isn't that Caroline from class 6, grade 11, the one who always ranks last? Where did she get the guts to confess to the school heartthrob? Laughter echoed around me. I looked up and saw Cheryl, full of malice, standing among the crowd, urging me to say the lines she had written for me. If I didn't, fill my backpack with trash or burn a small mark into my arm with a cigarette butt. I sighed and began. "Car, from the moment I first saw you, what did I ever do to you? Why are you confessing to me?" The boy I was offering the letter to reacted like he was being handed something filthy, though he still mockingly tried to grab the letter from my hand. But the next second, I stuffed the letter back into my chest without sparing him a glance. "Then I aren't like you anymore." I pushed my way through the crowd, leaving everyone standing there with puzzled faces. My mind was blank. I'd only one thought: I needed to find my brother. From the first second I was reborn, that was the only thing on my mind. When I arrived at the entrance of his school, panting, it was just in time for the flood of students leaving. I searched anxiously through the crowd, but I didn't really need to search. The moment my brother appeared, he dominated my line of sight. He was walking with a pretty classmate, nodding occasionally in response to her, polite and gentle, looking like a model student. Then naturally took the phone away, smiling as he said, "You never used to watch these kind of emotional videos. Charlie, that girl's been waving at you this whole time. Do you know her?" The girl walking beside him noticed me first. My brother could really put on an act. But the second, his gaze turned icy cold. "No, I don't." He didn't even glance at me as he turned away. I pushed through the crowd and grabbed his wrist. "Brother," I was still the same brother I knew, looking at me like I was some unlucky omen. "Let go of my hand." His voice was cold and clear, the disgust unmistakable. The extent of his revulsion made me doubt whether the man who gruesomely beheaded those bullies after my death could possibly be the same person. Even the girl beside him seemed a little uneasy. "Charlie, is this really your sister?" My brother paused, glancing down at me expressionlessly. I used to be terrified of that look. He always held others with a bit of condescension. But when it came to me, he added a deliberate layer of mockery, even my misunderstanding in my previous life, convincing me that if my brother knew I had died, he'd celebrate with fireworks. I lifted my head to meet his gaze. The early summer sunlight was so bright that I could count every single one of his eyelashes. "Actually, brother, I just want to tell you, if you love me so much, you don't have to hide it." After I said that, I could tell even the girl beside us regretted convincing Charlie to hear me out. But the person I was talking to remained expressionless, looking down at me for a few seconds as if he'd just heard a joke that barely amused him. Then he raised his hand, placing it on my forehead. "Do you have a fever? Or have you lost your mind?" Those were the first serious words my brother said to me after I was reborn. All my life felt like my brother couldn't wait to throw me away, and I was like a piece of clingy gum stuck to him. I had no coish at all, even though we were related by blood. Since childhood, Charlie had filled the role of my parent. I followed my brother to his tiny rented apartment. His school didn't provide dorms, so he had to live off campus. The place was small, and my brother had no intention of letting me in. He stood at the doorway, staring at me with that blank expression. "Brother, can I live with you?" I tugged at the hem of my skirt and looked up as I asked. His light brown eyes locked onto mine for a moment. Then he let out a cold laugh. "What do you think?" Then he turned and slammed the door shut. I knocked on the door. "Brother, if you don't open up, you'll wait out here forever." There was no response from inside. Charlie had shut the door on me, just like he had in my past life, treating me like I was less than air. After that serious illness when I was little, my parents had died, and all I had left was Charlie. My brother was the kind of person who could do anything perfectly. He was handsome, and he wasn't even my real brother, so falling for him was easy. But the longer I stayed with him, the more I realized he didn't have a heart. In my previous life, when he found out about my feelings for him, he avoided me like the plague. I never really had the chance to interact with him, and I grew more and more afraid of him. In the end, I barely spoke to him before I died. I never imagined that he would send those who bullied me to hell in such a brutal way. Did my brother hate me so much that he would kill those who once bullied me? Destroy his bright future just like that? Could it be that he had some sort of epiphany after my death, realizing he loved me? That would be way too melodramatic. What was he thinking? I slept at my brother's door, and in a daze, I saw the sky lightening in the east. True to his word, he had left me outside all night. There was a shadow in front of me. I rubbed my eyes and sniffled. Sleeping outside didn't feel good. I was cold, like I was about to catch a cold. My brother stood in front of me, fully dressed, holding something in his hand. He looked down at me, lost in thought. It took me a while to realize it was the love letter I had snatched back the day before. I forced a smile and said, "Brother, that's for you." He flipped through the letter with no expression and raised an eyebrow. "My name's Carnell." Then naturally took the phone away, smiling as he said, "You never used to watch these kind of emotional videos." That was the school heartthrob's Nami had forgotten to change the recipient. I quickly tried to explain, but after sitting outside all night, I could barely get up. My brother continued to examine the letter, making no move to help me. "Brother, have you had breakfast? I can go get some wontons for you." I held onto the railing to stand, hoping that a bowl of wontons might help ease the tension between us. He didn't nod or shake his head, just gave a slight, indifferent nod. Wait here," I said, asking him to stay where he was as I hurried down the stairs to find a food stall. On my way back with the wontons, I imagined he might have already left, ignoring me as always, but to my surprise, he was still there, leaning against the wall. The love letter was nowhere to be seen. I didn't ask about it and handed him the wontons. He reached out with a perfectly shaped finger to take the bag, making me a bit envious. But the next second, his fingers released the bag, and the wontons fell to the ground, even though the bag was sealed. Some of the broth spilled out. I said, "Seems like it's not edible anymore." Then naturally took the phone away, smiling as he said, "You never used to watch these kinds of emotional videos." With no hint of apology, grabbing his backpack and walking away as if he'd done it on purpose just for me to witness, I stood there, thinking, my brother really had a talent for stabbing me in the heart, even if I lived another lifetime. What's the meaning of running away yesterday? When I got to class, someone suddenly yanked my hair. That familiar pull immediately brought me back to a place I didn't want to revisit. Doesn't matter if you chickened out. The whole school knows about it now. A toad like you, dreaming of catching the heartthrob. I was pinned against the wall, my head throbbing with a cold-induced dizziness. Of course, I knew what was going on. My classmates' strange stares on the way to school had made that clear. Thanks to Cheryl's publicity, word had spread throughout the school that I had foolishly tried to become the school heartthrob's girlfriend, even though it was Cheryl herself who liked him. "Caroline, the homeroom teacher wants to see you." Someone called my name. Cheryl let go of my hair and gave me a sinister look. No matter how many lives I lived, facing her still made my stomach churn. I sniffled and, despite the pounding in my head, went to the teacher's office. "Caroline, do you know what the punishment is for early dating at our school?" I stood there for 40 minutes before the teacher, as if suddenly realizing it'd been waiting, started her lecture. I was used to her baseless accusations by now, Carr is a good student, focusing on his studies. Why are you bothering him? It seemed news of my confession had already reached her ear. Girls shouldn't act like that. And it's shameful. I had known since freshman year. After I was first bullied by Cheryl and her group and sought help from this very teacher, who told me I was shameless, that she was no different from them. There was no point in defending myself. You'll stand here and write a reflection. Include. And why you did such a thing. You'll read it aloud to everyone at the next flag-raising ceremony. It was just another way to let others humiliate me. When I staggered back to the classroom, I saw Cheryl and her group crowded around my chair, squeezing glue onto it. She's coming. Let's go before she sees us. I heard them laughing, mocking me as I approached. Look at her Carr's little whiffy, right? Cheryl teased, and the group burst into laughter. Videos behind me. I heard Carr jokingly shout, "Get out of here. You're my wife." More laughter followed, facing their mocking stares. I walked to the back of the classroom, picked up the trash can full of garbage, and dumped it over Cheryl's head. After her shouted obscenity, I was dragged into the nearby restroom by several people. Pain flooded over me, and my body instinctively assumed a defensive position. In the damn restroom, they vented their frustrations on me, punching and kicking. This combination of blows was something Cheryl had taught me well during the second half of my freshman year. What happens if I didn't follow their orders? Sometimes I would come across posts online discussing how to deal with bullies. If you're being bullied, tell a teacher, call the police. But if those methods actually work, how could they continue being so brazen? Cheryl's father owned the largest cooking oil processing factory in our town. After a single meal, they could get away with anything, while I faced even more public and exaggerated retaliation. When they were done hitting me and had tired themselves out, they yanked my hair and asked, "Have you had enough?" I spat out a mouthful of blood, nodded, and was pushed back onto the slippery floor of the restroom. No one would save me. Would no one save me? I dragged my battered body and my pounding head back to my brother's rented apartment, leaning against the door. I waited for about half an hour. In the fading glow of the sunset, he finally appeared, his tall figure casting a long shadow. The sunset reflected in his pupil. My brother was so dull. Not even a hint of expression on his face. Yet holding the keys in one hand and looking down at me. I was bullied. Brother. I looked up at him. For a long while, he had no reaction. Just when I thought he would stand there like a statue, he tugged at the corner of his mouth. What does that have to do with me? It hurts. Brother, I said, clutching my increasingly burning stomach. He had risked his life for me in the past. But now, upon hearing I had been bullied, he acted so indifferent. What were you thinking? If it hurt, go to the hospital. Do you need me to reimburse your medical expenses? He inserted the key into the lock and closed the door decisively. I hadn't been able to squeeze in when I was in good shape yesterday, and today, injured, it was even less likely. Sat up, and tried to stand. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew. The door, which had been slightly ajar, quietly opened. My brother's lock was broken. This cheap rental was indeed cheap. I steadied myself against the door, trying not to make a sound, and quietly slipped into the room that my brother had never allowed me to see in this life or the last. It was a simple studio apartment. If my brother hadn't kept everything in order, it would have been nothing but bare. The entrance led directly to a small room, which was all there was to this rental. When I pushed the door open, I locked eyes with my brother, who was on the phone. I had anticipated his place would be small, but I didn't expect it to be this small. The man hung up his phone, set it on the table, and looked down at me. Didn't I tell you to get lost? Can't you understand human words, Caroline? My gaze, however, was completely drawn to the wall behind him. The art was embedded in a pink letter. The degree of damage to the letter and the depth of the dart indicated the thrower's agitation. And that letter was one I thought Charlie had long since discarded. It was the love letter I had written to Carr. The man casually leaned against the wall, blocking my view. But suddenly, I felt emboldened. perhaps because of the fever clouding my mind. For the first time, I boldly moved within 20 centimeters of my brother. You didn't need to keep my letter to someone else. He looked down at me, and I cowed and find a single hint of emotion in his expression. After a long while, he smirked, almost stunning me with how handsome he looked. It's that I happened to be bothered by something, and there happened to be a piece of paper here. His tone was as cold as ever, even laced with sarcasm, as if to mock me for being overly sentimental. My brain spun. It hit me that I had been sick since morning, and after being beaten up, it was no wonder I had hurt my head. In that moment of weakness, I loosened my grip on his collar just for a second. In that fleeting moment of relaxation, all the strength I had built up dissipated, and I fell straight down, consciousness slipping into darkness. All I saw were his eyes, calm to the point of tranquility. He was like a lake frozen in time. No matter how many stones I threw into it, it wouldn't ripple. The first thing I noticed was the smell of disinfectant. A few seconds later, I woke up. Bright white lights illuminated the busy emergency room hallway. I was sitting in the waiting area, my school jacket neatly folded beside me. A sharp pain in the back of my hand made me realize I was on an IV drip. I was getting blood transfusion. I pressed the call button for a nurse, and an urgent-looking nurse came over to adjust my IV, reminding me not to move. "Where's my brother?" I asked in a hoarse voice. "Your brother? The handsome guy who brought you in?" "I just asked him to stay with me. Where is he?" I grabbed the nurse's arm as she started to turn away. No need for that. I could only imagine that he had probably left. I lay back on the hospital chair, sniffled, and felt that even if I cried, no tears would come. I pulled out my phone, staring at the message draft. It took me 3 or 4 tries to finally send. "Brother, today is my birthday. Do you remember?" I must have waited a long time because by the time the IV had run dry, I still hadn't received a reply. I sighed and, after finishing my medication, walked alone through the empty night. I sent another message. "Brother, I think there's a badge that got left in my backpack. Can I come get it tomorrow?" Sometimes I wanted to curse myself. Caroline, why do you like him so much? Is it liking him in one lifetime enough? Do you have to carry that affection into the next life too? The stars in the night sky didn't have the answer, nor did their vibrant shadows. But after a moment, my brother finally replied, "Don't come looking for me. He'll bring it to you." Perhaps he thought this way would avoid more trouble. He was clever. If it had been me going to find him, I would have definitely caused some kind of scene to test him. He said he would bring the badge to me after class the next day. But the following afternoon, I still couldn't wait for him. Cheryl and her gang came to find me again. After school, even though I packed my bag as quickly as I could, I was still grabbed by the arm the moment I stepped out of the classroom. Do you know what's funny? In our small class, there are social hierarchy. Cheryl and her group always stand at the top, ruling with an iron fist. "Caroline, haven't we been too nice to you lately?" I was forcefully pinned to the ground by 2 people, and then Cheryl sat on the desk in front of me, playing with an empty drink bottle and tapping it against my head. But this time, we've added a new member. The 5 of them came from wealthy families and looked down on us commoners. As I wondered why there were no transfer students in our class, one of them brought over a timid girl, who seemed reluctant to be there. The moment I saw her, I'd become the target of Cheryl and her gang. Back in freshman year, I'd witnessed them bullying a girl with a slight cleft lip. Being naive, had rushed in with a broom when I saw them force her to swallow a caterpillar. I became the next target. "Are you the one who said you wanted to join us?" Cheryl said, pretending to be friendly as she pinched the girl's face, who was curling in on herself. What do you want me to do?" The girl never once met my gaze, nervously gripping her clothing. "What do you think? Just treat her the way we treated you back then." The girl turned her head away, and the sunlight was blinding. The moment her eyes met mine, "I can't do it." Looking closer, the girl's hands were shaking violently, and tears were streaming down her face, sobbing uncontrollably. Her display of despair clearly irritated Cheryl. "What a useless thing." Cheryl pushed the girl, who was unprepared, causing her to fall backward. But no one paid attention to her as she struggled to get back up. With the people holding me down, Cheryl and her gang began to kick me, mixed with the girls' heart-wrenching sobs. The school was eerily silent in the whether no one was around or no one wanted to intervene. I didn't know. Until, at some point, the empty classroom echoed with a sudden knock on the door. Just as blood burst from my cheek, spraying into a beautiful arc, it splattered onto a pair of white sneakers. I looked up, and my nasal cavity instantly stung. A man wearing a black backpack stood there, holding the badge he was supposed to return to me, staring intently at me, who was being trampled beneath someone's shoe. Brother. My throat barely produced a sound. Who are you looking for? Tone was still vicious. But upon seeing my brother, her momentum weakened. My brother stood there with one hand in his pocket, staring at me. I raised my face to look at him, only to suddenly realize how disheveled I must appear. His gaze was calm. I instinctively hid my face behind my bang. I'm just delivering something to my sister. Walking right past them as if they didn't exist. Then, with a plop, he let the badge roll in front of me. Even the act of throwing it seemed dismissive, like he found me utterly distasteful. Then naturally took the phone away, smiling as he said, "You never used to watch these kind of emotional videos." Are her brother? Even my bullies were stunned by my brother's attitude. He looked down at me for a moment, then smirked. If I could help it, I wouldn't want to be her brother either. With just those words, I hadn't cried even after being beaten for so long. But now, my eyes suddenly turned red. Cheryl let out a tinkling laugh. How pathetic that even your family dislikes you. I stared intensely at the horizon where the dusk met the quarter. My brother didn't turn around. Not once. I shoved the already dirty badge into my pocket and walked along the avenue, clutching my injury. My stomach hurt too much. I didn't know if any bones were broken. My vision was blurry, and after taking a few steps, I simply couldn't move anymore. While leaning against a lamppost to catch my breath, I caught sight of two figures. I squinted, trying desperately to see more clearly. It was my brother, along with the girl who had been accompanying him home recently. I didn't know her name, but I felt that my brother looked at her more gently than he ever did at me. Though he had never looked at me gently since childhood, I knew he didn't like me. For 15 years, he had explicitly shown me, like a knife, cutting through the truth and nailing it in front of my eyes. I was still like a moth to a flame, hoping that at some point. What happened to you? You're covered in bruises, the girl said softly, smoothing down my school uniform from top to bottom. My brother stood aside, watching her. Make sure you go to the hospital. If you don't treat those wounds promptly, they'll get infected. She pulled a wet wipe from her bag and gently pressed it against my injury, causing me to flinch in pain. My brother grew impatient and spoke up. What are you talking to her for? The girl returned the wet wipe to me, turned around, and softly said goodbye before chasing after Charlie, who had already started walking ahead. I felt utterly exhausted and could only slide down beside the lamppost. The evening light stretching long shadows. I heard my brother's voice, distant and forlorn. I told you not to interfere with her, but you wouldn't let. Are you busy? Do you need me to bring you disinfectant wipes? For a long time afterward, I didn't seek out my brother. I thought to myself how useless I was. Unlike those reborn characters in novels who change their fate, I was living through a second chance and still ended up just as miserable as in my past life. And whether in this life or the last, I couldn't understand why I couldn't stop liking him. It seemed that life had returned to a mundane routine. Cheryl and her group continued to make my life difficult from time to time, but I didn't bother my brother. My life became increasingly mundane, and at some point, I almost forgot I had lived another life, until that incident happened. That event made it clear to me that I was indeed reborn. Everything was reshuffled because of my tiny choices, collapsing like a line of dominoes. I remember that afternoon. It was the dullest chemistry class. Because of my second chance, I focused intently on studying for the college entrance exam, wanting to score higher. In my previous life, if I hadn't died right before the exams, I might have gotten into Tsinghua or Peking University. The teacher was halfway through the lesson when the sunlight quietly spilled over half the blackboard. My phone vibrated on the desk, but I paid it no mind. A dark shadow rapidly fell by the window, followed by a loud crash that deeply shook the numbed campus. Someone jumped. I heard whispers and saw people tiptoeing by the window, discussing the unfortunate incident and naming the deceased. My gaze fell on the lit screen of my phone on the desk. Caroline, I'm sorry. You shouldn't have saved me. If it weren't for me, you wouldn't be suffering like this. Had a cleft lip and had been bullied for a long time by Cheryl's group, who worked out of town, had almost saved enough money for her surgery. That day, she had witnessed how I took her place. After returning home, the kind-hearted girl could no longer bear it. One day, she jumped from the 6th floor of the school building. Her mother was held back by people, crying inconsolably, her voice so hoarse it was indistinguishable from a human sound. I stood outside the crowd, watching the caution tape stretch across the ground. The school gave us half a day off for this incident, insisting we keep it strictly confidential. I heard Cheryl's group behind me, whispering, "What bad luck. Why would anyone jump? It's disgusting." I felt a chill spread through my body, as if my blood had been drained. At that moment, if I hadn't provoked Cheryl to get my brother's attention, they wouldn't have escalated their bullying against me. If their bullying hadn't escalated, Deborah would never have been involved. Like the gentle flap of a butterfly's wings triggering a storm, my seemingly insignificant choices might have silently toppled countless unspoken consequences. Like a row of dominoes, sitting on the ground, trembling, I took out my phone and sent my brother a message. "Brother, I'm so scared. I'm really scared." At some point, this echoed a memory deep within me. I seemed to have sent a similar message to my brother a long time ago. But what happened back then? I didn't remember. It was something that occurred when I was very little. All I knew was that after that, I lost my parents. All I had left was Charlie, the white funeral hall. Deborah's funeral had few mourners. The last time I saw Deborah's mother in the audience, crying hysterically, she now seemed drained of all energy. I placed a bouquet of white flowers neatly in front of the altar. Deborah looked so happy in the photo. I thought she probably hadn't smiled that happily in a long time. I bowed deeply 3 times before her and turned to leave the hall. Ab's nest and lead. Crows cawed and circled in the sky, and the world felt just as bleak and colorless to me as it did to most people. Until I saw a figure that pinned me in place. My brother? What was he doing here? Did he know Deborah? What was his connection to this event? This was strange. Logically, he shouldn't be here. Just as I thought to run a few steps closer to find out, I turned the corner only to find nothing there. I stared at the empty corner and had to attribute it to the mental exhaustion I had been feeling lately. Hallucinating about my brother. Deborah's death was ultimately ruled a suicide. Cheryl and her gang continued to live carefree. A few days later, unexpectedly, a video suddenly went viral across major news outlets. It was footage of Cheryl's group violently confronting the girl, one of whom was pushed against a desk corner, holding her right eye as it started to bleed. That girl was Deborah. The other girl being beaten was me. Although the filming angle was awkward, Cheryl and her friends' faces were clearly visible. The video was said to have been found on the deceased Deborah's phone. In the age of social media, information spread rapidly. This kind of video that incited public outrage, circulating across various platforms. Then Cheryl's parents contacted the media to remove the trending topics. However, they naturally took the phone away, smiling as he said, "You never used to watch these kind of emotional videos." The rapidly increasing clicks far outpaced their efforts to delete the post, and marketing accounts spread it like wildfire. Suddenly, we became famous. Reporters waited for us on our way to school, and nosy students from neighboring schools risked sneaking into ours. One day, one of Cheryl's group came to our school with visible injuries. Soon after, they stopped coming to school. Honestly, none of that mattered to me. What I cared about was that my brother appeared in that video too. His words, "If I could help it, I would want to be her brother," directly implicated him and made him a target of online outrage. What kind of bastard brother is this? Can this animal be a brother? Should he just die? Is his attitude after his sister has been bullied to this extent? I then heard people say my brother was also getting beaten at school. I tried calling him several times, but he didn't answer. I went to his rented apartment, but the lock had been replaced, and I couldn't get in. Then I heard from classmates that Cheryl and her friends were being sent abroad by their parent. It was the standard solution one could expect. A few days later, Cheryl and her group stopped coming to school. I assumed they had successfully been sent abroad to continue their bullying elsewhere. One morning, I caught sight of the day's news headlines. Police found 5 corpses in the suburbs this morning, confirmed to be the main perpetrators of the bullying case. The killer has surrendered. More details are still under investigation. Was Deborah's father, who had been out of town to save money for her medical expenses, and whom I had never met. Cheryl and her friends probably never imagined that the silent driver who took them to the airport would be Deborah's father. This time, he sent them straight to an eternal hell with no chance of reincarnation. Bullying, revenge for a girl. Entire case continued to draw increasing attention from various media outlets. Cheryl's parents filed a lawsuit against Deborah's father, but in the court of public opinion, if my daughter had been treated like that, I'd be the first to charge in and chop them all up. That is a true hero. Support Clement Zhang Shiking's innocent. On the day of the trial, crowds spontaneously gathered outside the courthouse, holding banners in support of Deborah's father. Major media outlets rushed to cover the courtroom proceeding. Meanwhile, Cheryl's father's business and those of several parents of the bullying accomplices were also significantly affected. Given the nature of this case, it was clear that Deborah's father was facing the death penalty. From a humanitarian perspective, this was merely a father's only way of seeking revenge when he felt completely helpless. Additionally, with Cheryl and her group displaying their arrogance and the cruelty of their bully, Doring's body still bore marks from being burned by cigarette butts and signs of abuse. Whereas optimistically speculated that Clement Zhang Shiking might see his death sentence commuted to life imprisonment or probation. However, no one expected that halfway through the trial, the parents of the bullies would drop the case in court. They refused to accept interviews from any media outlet, leading to widespread speculation. Some claimed they had a change of heart, while others suggested they were trying to salvage their public image. In any case, the case quickly became shrouded in layers of fog. Moreover, news cycles are time-sensitive. One trending topic is quickly replaced by another. As a result, the once boisterous attention on Deborah's case began to dwindle. While packing my things in the dormitory, I noticed that the badge my brother had personally given me was missing. It wasn't something particularly important. I hadn't paid much attention to it afterward. I'd been dreaming about my childhood repeatedly these days, and one morning, I wanted to find that badge, but I couldn't locate it anywhere. How could it have disappeared? I got up and opened my computer, searching for the video of us being bullied that had gone viral online. The filming angle was extremely odd. Shot from below as I lay on the ground, I compared it to the scene at the time and suddenly realized this was the exact angle of that badge. It was seemingly tossed in front of me by my brother but managed to capture everything happening at that moment. This discovery sent chills down my spine late at night. The badge was indeed mine, but for a long time, it had been in my brother's possession. He had installed a camera on it at that time, but I cowed at make sense of it. If my brother filmed the video, why didn't he blur his face? Why would he expose himself to public scrutiny and be criticized alongside the bully? When I couldn't figure it out, I usually just asked directly. When I reached my brother's apartment door, I didn't realize it was already 4 a time when even the roosters were fast asleep. I didn't want to disturb him. I leaned against his door. I had done this before, adjusting my sitting position with ease. But I hadn't leaned there long when the door suddenly swung open from the inside. You don't know, do you? The simplest home outfit accentuated his tall and lean figure. Leaning against the door, his brows furrowed deeply. Under the dim moonlight, I noticed several places on him had medical tape. My brother's skin was painfully pale, making those bandages stand out. He had indeed been beaten and had been avoiding me those days to spare me worry. Brother, you posted that video. Shadows cast sharp lines on my brother but not on me. You also installed the camera on the badge that night. You intentionally left that badge behind, knowing I would take it. I wondered why that girl who kept following you was so insistent on fixing my clothes. She must have taken the badge then. I saw you at Deborah's funeral. You took the video to her father, didn't you? As a trade. You asked him to prove that the video actually came from Deborah's phone. Because that way, I wouldn't be labeled as one of those spreading the video. Wouldn't attract revenge, and wouldn't be in danger. But I don't understand why you had to show your face. Brother, I was pressed against the door. To say pressed was an understatement because his action was gentle. Teasing would be a more fitting description. Easing with my brother, I couldn't even dare to imagine it. Then naturally took the phone away, smiling as he said, "You never used to watch these kind of emotional videos. Because I love you?" My brother gently tilted my chin with his smooth, white fingers. It was too close. My brother and I had never been this close. I stared at the face I had long admired. And as he beckoned me with his eyes, I felt my breath catch in my throat. "Everything I do is for you. I actually like you a lot." Like to the point of feeling like I might die? My brother stopped at a distance I couldn't even dare to imagine. His warm breath brushed against the side of my face. "Do you think I would say that to you? Caroline, can you stop daydreaming all day? What right do you have to say that?" My brother quickly pulled away from me, and I felt as if all my strength had been drained. Just like that. My brother, when I thought I could reach out for his sleeve, effortlessly pushed me away. He was like a distant star in the sky, twinkling and shimmering. I knew he was beautiful, but I couldn't have him. On my way home, walking toward the sunrise, my phone vibrated with a notification. It was a news alert about a recent event. Deborah's father had died. While being transferred to the relevant authorities, an out-of-control truck collided with the vehicle he was in. There were no remains. These days, I've been thinking about how everything has happened too quickly and too quickly. If I didn't have memories from my past life, I would definitely distance myself from my brother at this point. But I just can't understand. I really can't make sense of it. Cheryl and her friends died right after I told my brother that I was being bullied. What a coincidence. So does everything really have nothing to do with my brother? Does he truly hate me that much? It all feels like a jumble of nonsensical characters. I keep feeling that there's one last piece of the puzzle missing. As for that missing piece, everything points to one singular thing that I have no knowledge of. Whether from this life or the fire that took my adoptive parents 10 years ago. It also took away all of my previous memory. I looked down at my phone and typed one last message to my brother. "Brother, can you tell me what happened 10 years ago? If you tell me, I won't bother you anymore." I thought this message would sink like all the others I had sent over the years. After all, despite my attempts to remember or exhaustively question him, he had always refused to discuss it. But that night, my brother surprisingly replied, "Tomorrow evening at 7. Come find me." At the time, I thought perhaps it was the phrase "I won't bother you anymore" that touched my brother. I figured I should pay attention to his unusual behavior. I still remember that evening when I went to meet my brother. The sunset burned fiercely, painting the sky. The shadows of trees and buildings intertwined. I adjusted my school uniform collar to at least look presentable before pushing open my brother's apartment door. The sun was just setting behind the tall building. His room was still devoid of any unnecessary decorations. The night was falling, and he hadn't turned on many lights. There was a pile of newspapers on the table. It was the first time I had carefully examined his bedroom. I was surprised to find that he had accumulated so many medical books on his bookshelf. Was he preparing to study medicine? I cautiously looked at the man sitting in the chair, aimlessly flipping through a newspaper, and smiled in a way that was meant to please him. "Brother, I bought you a little cake." "Oh right." That day was indeed my brother's birthday. His gaze finally shifted from the dense text on the newspaper to me, and it was so cold, like a desolate night, wholly and still. I've always thought that others were stupid since I was a child. You're no different, Caroline. That was the first time my brother openly shared his feelings with me. "I know you like me. Your gaze can't be described as anything less than blatant. But do you know what I like? and not like everyone else. I like exposed, bloody bones, dying screams, and withered human shapes. Every moment, I think about how exciting it would be to watch a living being perish in my hands. This the real me. He stood up and leaned closer to me. For a moment, I didn't know why. But I stepped back. He smiled in satisfaction. I sent Dad on his way. Mom walked in, drawn by the noise, and stumbled upon that scene. I honestly didn't mean to harm her. She got scared and backed away, then fell down the stairs. You must have been asleep at the time. I set a fire, intending to burn you along with him. Unfortunately, you survived. You've been clinging to me like a persistent ghost ever since. That's the story from back then. Caroline. It sounded like a fairy tale. No one would believe it. Not even ghosts. Brother, your storytelling skills are really something. My brother seemed to know. I would look at him as if to say, are you kidding me? In the darkness, like a beckoning shadow, he raised his hand and lightly squeezed my neck. The pulse of my veins was so clear. It felt like they might burst at a light squeeze. Don't believe me? Then naturally took the phone away, smiling as he said, you never used to watch these kinds of emotional videos. People instinctively forget things that cause them pain. Brother, haven't you noticed that sometimes your lies are full of holes? Yeah, I didn't have that memory anymore. But just based on feeling, I couldn't have liked a murderer for so many years. In your eyes, I must be a good person. He suddenly chuckled. But is that really the case? It's okay. I'll help you think. He pressed my head down onto the desk. I struggled in out of fear of him. But because I was terrified of realizing that I had been avoiding something all Alan's arguments I had been running from for so long. Brother, let go of me. Why should I believe you? A yellowed newspaper reporting on the fire from years ago came into view. It was about that fire, about the memory I was missing from my mind. Like a rushing demon, I was afraid of fire. If just seeing those words would make me tremble, felt as if that raging fire was surrounding me once again. Brother, help me, I beg you. The little girl cried out in the flames, and this time, I saw it more clearly than ever. My brother looked into my eyes, and there had never been warmth there. He left me in that room, surrounded by flames, without looking back. My brother hadn't lied to me. In fact, when had he ever turned back? Where had he ever liked me? I was pinned down in front of that newspaper, like my heart being ripped open by a bloodied knife. It was nothing but a self-deceptive fantasy, a moth drawn to the flame. I had woven a delusion of love, dreaming a long dream of rebirth. Trying to deceive myself, I lowered my head and looked at my abdomen, soaked in bright red blood. It dripped onto the ground and dropped. There was a beautiful knife lodged there. But knife was my brother's exquisitely beautiful hand. Caroline. I couldn't hold myself up anymore and fell into his arms. He embraced me, whispering like a lover. I've turned 18. Thinking about what kind of gift I should give myself for my coming of age. He stroked my hair. Maybe. Life. So stupid. Like your ignorant pet. He said he hated me. My brother. It felt like I had been in a long dream. When I opened my eyes again, the nurse in the hospital said I had been in a coma for 15 days. Normal people don't stay in a coma this long. It's because you didn't want to wake up. The nurse looked at me with concern. While changing the IV, I turned to gaze out the window at the branches of the trees. Summer had passed, and the autumn wind swept through, causing a leaf to flutter down, taking with it the subtle chill in the air. Sometimes I think it would be nice to sleep forever. That way, I wouldn't have to face the cold winter or the fact that my brother is a murderer. Perhaps it was because I liked to escape so much that I'd fabricated him into a good brother. Otherwise, I would truly have no one to rely on in this world. My brother was arrested by the police for intentionally injuring me after stabbing my abdomen. At the same time, the arson case from that year was reopened for investigation. However, due to the statute of limitations, it was hard to bring my brother to justice. After my parents died in that fire, my brother and I, being adopted children, had no one to manage our family's vast estate. However, my father's sister or aunt had been investigating the case. That, a graceful woman entered my hospital room. although she was wearing a dark sweater. A jade on her neck and wrists indicated her extraordinary status. Caroline, it's been a long time since we last met. You're it. The woman stood in front of me with a man in a white coat. She spoke softly, but her eyes betrayed no hint of concealment. She pinched my wrist gently. Relax. I'll ask the doctor a few questions. The man in the white coat sat down in front of me and pulled out something that looked like a pocket watch. Waving it in front of me, then naturally took the phone away, smiling as he said, "You never used to watch these kind of emotional videos. You're called Caroline, right?" I stared at the pocket watch swinging back and forth, my consciousness hazy. I might as well have given up struggling. Over the past 10 years, you've been living with Charlie. I lived separately from him. Does he take care of you? Not really. What's his attitude toward you usually? Very cold. How do people around you evaluate your relationship? They don't understand and say, he's unworthy of being my brother. I heard from his friends that he doesn't like you very much. Is that true? He hates me. Do you have feelings for him? Then naturally took the phone away, smiling as he said, "You never used to watch these kind of emotional videos. What about him?" Then naturally took the phone away, smiling as he said, "You never used to watch these kind of emotional videos." Answer the question. Caroline. I feel like he doesn't. Then naturally took the phone away, smiling as he said, "You never used to watch these kind of emotional videos." If there's even a 1 in 10,000 chance, do you think he would save you? At this point, I didn't know why, but tears were streaming down my face. My aunt nodded and comfortingly rubbed my shoulder. Regardless, your brother is truly a demon. The Zhu family has had 8 generations of bad luck with him as their adopted son. I could clearly hear the sound of the woman grinding her back teeth. But it's okay. From now on, he will never exist. The woman laughed, her black silhouette taking the door of the hospital room with her. The wind lifted the curtain, draining away the last bit of warmth. I watched the drifting leaves and wondered if one day I could fly away like them. I had a dream. When I was 7, my brother and I were outside in the winter, amidst flying snowflake, in a splendid home that cultivated 2 adopted sons like us. I ran to the yard and found my brother sitting on a swing, gazing at the stars. "Brother, what do you want to do when you grow up?" I no. "Then let's travel the world together." "Brother, I heard that traveling is the happiest thing in the world, with mountains beyond mountains and seas beyond seas." "Brother." He jumped off the swing and looked at me with amusement. Suddenly, fireworks burst into the sky, reflecting in his eyes. I've forgotten what he answered back then. But I know,